English translation, 136th Contact, Part 3, Tuesday, 14th of October, 1980, 2341 Rs.
Then we can expect a great deal in the next year and in the next decades. Only one thing still does not click for me with regards to your explanations. While you were talking, I thought of something in regards to your words which you said earlier. When you said that by mid-year of 1981, still many things will happen, which you would still have to explain to me before you can make further remarks about the American president. I have indeed been thinking about this man. I discovered in my calculations that what you said 10 minutes ago must still arrive before mid-1981, which is that the new U.S. president is to be killed.
Sure, that is correct. The date and time of this incident are already certain and unavoidable, but I explained to you that I want to give the coming events in chronological order. But if you are so impatient, then I would be glad to omit several upcoming events, which will still occur before the assassination attempt is committed against Ronald Reagan.
Are they of such great importance? What are they?
They are to be classified into the earthquakes that are only of incidental importance, primarily the continuous quakes that will occur in Italy and Greece. Besides this, there are some greater criminal and felonious facts to be mentioned, particularly a large series of murders in America, which will cause outrage all over the world, because by the middle of 1981, about 30 black children will be killed there, and this number will only be the official claim.
Another Negro child found dead, the 21st victim.
Atlanta, USA. The 21st murdered Negro child in 20 months was found yesterday in Atlanta, Georgia. Boaters discovered the body of the boy in a river. The dead man was dressed only in underwear. One boy is still missing in the Atlanta area. All we can say is that the boy was killed in a similar manner as the other black boys, said Police Sergeant Denny Hendricks. A special squad of the Criminal Investigation Department has been assigned to solve the mysterious series of murders.
Blick, Zurich, Wednesday, 1st April, 1981.
Valuable leads due to 27th victim.
Atlanta, 14th May. AFP, the latest victim so far in the series of murders of youths of color in the American city of Atlanta, TA Wednesday, provided investigators with valuable leads that may lead to a solution. This was announced on Thursday by local police chief Dick Hand. The 27th victim, 17-year-old William Barrett, unlike the previous ones, was found barely 3 hours after he was strangled. The 26 previous bodies had often been discovered several weeks or even months later. When Mrs. Police maintained complete silence for 24 hours. Various signs had initially prevented investigators from immediately classifying the 17-year-old as the latest victim in the series of murders so far, explained Police Chief Hand. However, traces had been found which proved that there was a connection with the 26 other corpses, Hand stressed. As is known, threads that could have come from a car carpet were found on several murder victims. William Barrett had much in common with the earlier murder victims. He was also black, youthful, small in stature, and came from very poor backgrounds. Currently, Atlanta is still searching for a 10-year-old boy who has been missing since last September.
Tagesanzeiger, Zürich, Friday, 15th May 1980. Blick, Zürich.
The 28th Negro victim.
The wave of murders in the U.S. state of Georgia continues. Fishermen discovered the naked body of a colored man of about 20 years in the Chattahoochee River near Atlanta, the 28th murder victim. Several bodies of black youths have been recovered from this river in the last 22 months. Despite millions of dollars spent on special police units and vigilante groups, it has not been possible to solve any of these mysterious murders.
Blick, Zurich, Tuesday, 26th May, 1981.
New mass murderer shocks America. Blonde girls are his victims.
Angelton. A new crazed mass murderer is terrorizing the United States. Police believe he has already killed 40 young girls. The common feature of all the victims, they have blonde hair and wear a center parting. 2 more bodies have now been found near the Texas town of Angelton. Dental impressions told the investigators who the murdered girls were: Georgia Gears, 14, and Brooks Bracewell, 14. The 2 girls, missing for 7 years, had been killed by gunshots to the head, as had all the victims. So far, 21 bodies have been found. 19 young girls are still missing. Matt Wingo, Angelton Police Lieutenant. The killer must have sexual motives. He is a sadist. He usually buried his victims near swamps and creeks.
Blick, Zurich, Thursday, 9th April, 1981.
Ripper hunted to catch Atlanta killer.
G.H. London, Ronald Gregory, 59. Jean Vicain, head of the police task force that spent 5 years searching for the Yorkshire Ripper, Peter Sutcliffe, 34, is to help solve the mass murders in Atlanta, the capital of the U.S. state of Georgia. Chief Constable Gregor is flying to the U.S. next week at the request of Lee Brown, head of Atlanta's security police. Already last January, after the arrest of the 13-time woman killer Sutcliffe, Brown had phoned his colleague from the West Yorkshire Police and asked him for advice. Now, after the 27th body of a black youth was found in Atlanta 2 days ago, it was in the Buck, the Americans again reached out to the famous British policeman, and he agreed to answer the call for help.
Blick, Zurich, Saturday, 16th May, 1981.
Is the Atlanta mass murderer finally caught?
Atlanta, the first success in the nearly 2-year manhunt for the mysterious Atlanta mass murderer in the U.S. state of Georgia. 23-year-old Wayne B. Williams was charged yesterday with the murder of Nathaniel Cater, 27, the 28th victim. Williams had been arrested on Sunday. He was convicted on the basis of vials found on Cater's body. Williams, a TV cameraman, photographer, and music agent, had previously been questioned 3 times as a murder suspect, but there was not enough evidence to charge him. The results of the tests in the police laboratory are solid. The fibers on Nathaniel Cater's body are identical to those found in Williams's flat. "This time it's enough," announced Lee P. Brown, Atlanta police chief. On the 22nd of May, the Special Brigade first became aware of Williams. Police officers observed him on a Chattahoochee River bridge, near which the body of the strangled black Cater was found 2 days later. After inconclusive interrogations, the police mounted an electronic monitor on Williams' car and have been watching him around the HRs ever since. Finally, the day before last, the man was arrested. So far, Williams has not confessed to the murder he is accused of. And the citizens of Atlanta continue to tremble. Many doubt whether it is really the wanted mass murderer.
Blick, Zurich, Tuesday, 23rd June, 1981.
Nurse alleged to have murdered 4 babies.
Ottawa, 28th March. DPA, a 24-year-old Canadian nurse, is suspected of murdering 4 babies at one of the world's most prestigious children's hospitals, the Hospital for Sick Children in Toronto. Nurse Susan Nels, who comes from a family of doctors, is due to appear before a magistrate on Monday. Nellis, an unassuming woman just 5 feet tall, had been arrested on Wednesday following the death of a 3-month-old boy with a heart condition who died of a digoxin overdose just 12 hours after arriving. On Friday, she was charged with 3 other deaths in the cardiac unit between January and March. Coroners and detectives are reviewing documents about the 40 or so other deaths in the cardiac unit over the past year.
Tagesanzeiger Zürich, Monday 30th March 1980.
Ripper kills on divine mission.
22nd May. In the sensational trial of the 34-year-old British lorry driver Peter Sutcliffe, apostrophized as the Yorkshire Ripper, the Old Bailey Court in London sentenced the accused to life imprisonment for 13 murders of women. Sutcliffe, who outwardly led a blameless middle-class life, is accused of murdering 13 women, mainly prostitutes, in a bestial manner between 1975 and 1980. According to his own statement, it was during his earlier work as a gravedigger that he first heard the divine voice instructing him to kill prostitutes. When he was then interrogated 9 times by the police as a suspect without being arrested, his conviction that he was acting on a divine mandate had been strengthened. In the weeks of hearings, the court was unable to determine whether the confessed Sutcliffe was mentally disturbed or a normal violent criminal. Despite numerous psychological reports, the 12 jurors failed to reach a unanimous verdict. Sutcliffe is sent to prison as a murderer by majority vote. The gruesome case is reminiscent of the series of murders that took place in the slums of London's East End in 1888. 5 prostitutes fell victim to a man who called himself Jack the Ripper, and whose identity was never cleared up. Sutcliffe imitated the original Ripper down to the last detail, for example by always following the same ritual pattern when mutilating the corpses.
Chronik 1980, Chronik Verlag, Dortmund, Friday 22nd May 1981.
Bloodbath among Muslim population.
SDA-DPA. According to the Far Eastern Economic Review, the Philippine military has caused a bloodbath on the small island of Pata. According to official information, 750 inhabitants were killed, according to unofficial reports up to 2,000 human beings. The reason is said to have been a punitive expedition against members of the Moro National Liberation Front, MNLF.
Tagesanzeiger Zürich, Saturday, 9th May 1990.
Mass murder. 6 human beings were found shot to death in an apartment building in Clinton, a suburb of the U.S. state capital Washington, on Saturday. Police described the killing as the worst mass murder in the area so far. AP.
Tagesanzeiger Zürich, Monday 4th May 1981.
24-year-old murdered mother and her 3 children. He died in the electric chair yesterday.
Michigan City, USA. Head guard Jack Duckworth pulled down the lever. A jolt of 2,300 volts shot through the body of the man strapped to the black chair. Head and limbs contorted in terrible convulsions for 30 seconds. This is how 4-time murderer Stephen T. Judy, 24, who had stubbornly refused to apply for clemency, died yesterday in Indiana State Prison. "I cannot stand a life behind bars," he had already declared at his sentencing. "I would rather die." Judy had raped and strangled housewife Terry Chasteen in April 1979 and then drowned their 3 children. The death row inmate marked the tough man until the end. On the eve of the execution, he gave a press conference at which he declared, "If society is not capable of putting people like me on a better path, then let it liquidate us." Even as his last hour approached yesterday morning, he remained cool and calm. He did not bat an eyelid as the prison barber shaved those places on his legs and head where the electrodes were connected. He ate the last meal, ox steak, lobster tails, and jacket potatoes, with comfort. He only became angry when the director of the institution did not serve him beer. He walked with a firm step from the death cell to the execution chamber. Without foreign help, he climbed into the electric chair. I am not accusing anyone of anything. What is happening now is only the logical consequence of what I have done, he said, shrugging his shoulders. Then the chief warder performed his duties.
Blick, Zurich, Tuesday, 10th March, 1981.
Nursing home manager poisoned 17 patients.
Trondheim, 5th June. AP, the former manager of a nursing home for the elderly and sick near the Norwegian city of Trondheim, has confessed to having administered a lethal dose of poison to 17 patients. This was announced by the police in Trondheim on Friday. The 45-year-old Arnfinn Nesset is suspected of having killed a total of 19 human beings. So far, he has admitted to injecting a dose of the poison Curacit into the veins of 17 patients at the Orkdal home between 1977 and November last year. Nesset was arrested in March after an employee, who was concerned about the high number of deaths, noticed needle marks on the arm of a deceased patient and observed that Nesset had entered the patient's room alone shortly before the patient passed away. Nesset had initially claimed that he had bought a large quantity of the poison in order to kill dogs with it. The authorities have so far kept quiet about the motive.
Tagesanzeiger, Zürich, Saturday, 6th June 1980.
Swiss sentenced to death pardoned.
Lomé burned 26th March. AFP-TA Rudolf Eigenmann of Zurich, recently sentenced to death for double murder in the African state of Togo, has been pardoned by Togolese head of state Gnassingbé Eyadema. The death sentence was commuted to imprisonment. It was announced in the capital Lomé on Thursday. The Federal Department of Foreign Affairs in BEM could not comment further on the alleged act of clemency on Thursday, as it had not yet been confirmed in writing. However, if the report is true, the canton of Zurich could now press for the 34-year-old's extradition. Eigenmann was found guilty by a Togolese court in February of deliberately shooting dead a German couple aged 24 and 30 in December last year. Eigenmann's wife and sister-in-law were each sentenced to 10 years in prison for complicity.
Tagesanzeiger, Zürich, Friday, 27th March 90.
Parents and brother shot in their sleep.
Milan, 2nd March. AP 24-year-old Maurizio Della Mota confessed to shooting his parents and brother in their sleep late Friday night, according to Milan police on Sunday. Della Mota said he hated his father and mother because they preferred his brother Bruno, who was 1 year older than him. Above all, he said, he was annoyed that his brother got more money than he did. The family had run a cemetery nursery together in a suburb of Milan.
Tagesanzeiger, Zürich, Monday, 23rd March 1989.
The truth about the number of victims will be even more terrible, however. This case will move the whole world, whereby different other homogeneous or similar cases will only find marginal interest, including one of a similar nature that will occur in England.
Five-time murderer of women sentenced in France, life sentence for killer of the shadow.
Paris, 10th June. DPA, in a sensational circumstantial trial, 40-year-old French worker Marcel Barbeau was sentenced to life imprisonment for 5 counts of murdering women in Beauvais, north of Paris, on Wednesday. Against a directive of the Ministry of Justice, the prosecutor had demanded the death penalty for the so-called killer of the shadow. The killer of the shadow allegedly attacked and killed 8 women at dusk in the area of Nogent-sur-Oise near Paris from 1969 to 1976. On one occasion, a random witness died, a 9th woman survived. Barbeau was charged in court with 5 murders committed between 1973 and 1976. The prosecutor had asked the jury to choose between the guillotine and life imprisonment, depending on their personal attitude. He himself pleaded for the death penalty because it was the only way to guarantee that Barbeau would never be freed again. The prosecutor thus defied an official advice of the new Justice Minister Maurice Faure not to ask for death sentences anymore. The new French leadership wants to push through the abolition of the guillotine in Parliament in autumn.
Tagesanzeiger, Zürich, Saturday, 11th June 1980.
These things do not seem to be very important to me, because in this world, these are incidents that have been on the agenda for a long time. The human being simply takes note of them, says in feigned indignation and feigned sympathy, terrible, terrible, and then it is soon dismissed and forgotten by him or her. Therefore, he or she does not give much thought about these things because they do not concern him or her. Only greater things such as earthquakes, wars, assassination attempts on prominent ones, volcanic eruptions, floods, droughts, epidemics, atom bombs, and new deadly technologies, etc. will make a few little impressions on him or her. But he or she will also not do anything about even these few items because to him or her, everything has ultimately happened too far away, and thus it does not affect them directly. So for them also everything is forgotten very quickly.
Then it would be quite unnecessary if I would continue to cite further occurrences.
That is not so, because greater and world-moving events, even if this movement is only momentary, can be made known to the public and brought to its attention through information outlets. And since you mention these events to me, already a very long time before their arrival, various humans will think about them and perhaps become of a better mind through this.
That is logical. Good. Then I will give you the necessary information about the President of America. It will be on the 30th of March at the time of 2145 HRs, in front of the Hilton Hotel in the city of his speech, where the President will be shot down by a student named John Hinckley. Ronald Reagan will suffer a shot to the wall of his lung. However, he will be healed surgically. His injury will not bring direct mortal danger for him, while some of his companions, however, will be brought into direct mortal danger, including a security officer and Reagan's press spokesman, among other ones.
President Reagan operated on after shooting attack.
Washington, 30th March. APDPA AFP, American President Ronald Reagan was wounded by a gunshot in the left side of his chest in an assassination attempt on Monday afternoon. Reagan is in hospital. He has already undergone surgery. According to the presidential advisor who was at the hospital, the president was wounded in the lung. However, the White House announced that there was no cause for serious concern. In the assassination attempt, Reagan's press secretary, James Brady, was shot in the head. His condition was described as extremely serious. A security guard and a police officer are also in critical condition with gunshot wounds. Reagan and his companions had been attending an event with representatives of the Construction Workers Union. As the president was leaving the Hilton Hotel, the man fired 5 or 6 shots at him. The security guards immediately threw themselves on the president and forced him into his armored limousine. According to the U.S. Secret Service, 22-year-old John Warnock Hinckley Jr. from Evergreen in the U.S. state of Colorado carried out the assassination attempt on U.S. President Ronald Reagan 70. Several eyewitnesses had identified the blond young man as the shooter. No motive for Hinckley's attack was revealed at first.
Increasing Garvolt.
RB Washington, 30 March. A few minutes after the assassination, the American public witnessed the events at the assassination site in Washington on television. For security reasons, the White House withheld information about the wounding of the president for the time being. They first wanted to make sure that Vice President George Bush, who was in Texas, was safe and on his way back to the capital. According to the Constitution, the president decides when the office is to pass to the vice president. People are still stunned and unable to assess the significance of this act of violence. The assassin was 5 years old when President John F. Kennedy was murdered in 1963 after 1,000 days in office. President Reagan had been in office less than 100 days. The assassination took place against the background of rapidly growing violence in the USA. Prominent personalities have been the victims of assassination attempts in recent months. In Atlanta, the murderer of 20 black children is being sought. Tougher economic conditions and drastic budget cuts announced by the government have led to tense discussions. The still unknown motives of the assassin are also likely to be decisive in determining how and whether this new act of violence in American history will affect the political atmosphere. The attack on the American president is the first such incident since the two assassinations of President Gerald Ford in California, September 1975. Unlike Reagan, Ford was unharmed. Numerous U.S. presidents had been assassinated before him. For Lincoln, Garfield, McKinley, Kennedy were killed.
Tagesanzeiger Zürich, Tuesday, 31st March 1981.
By W. Meister and G. Seimer.
Washington. It happened on the 70th day of his presidency at 21:30 HR Swiss time. President Ronald Reagan, 71, had finished speaking at a trade union convention, stepped outside and waved to some passers-by. Then a young blond man approached from the background. In his fist was a revolver. Shots rang out. The president flinched slightly but continued to pace. 3 of the people around him fell to the ground, bleeding. Reagan was already at the black limousine waiting for him. Security guards pushed him down and shoved him into the car. Police sirens were already wailing all around. Policemen rushed the assassin. Reagan's car sped away towards George Washington Hospital. Reagan, the oldest president in American history, got out of the car under his own power at the hospital and chatted briefly with the doctors. It must have been an inhuman effort for the former actor, for he was seriously injured. After a short examination in the emergency ward, surgery was performed. The bullet had hit the left lung and the lung had stopped working. After the operation, Reagan's condition was described as satisfactory, corresponding to the circumstances. The bullet had missed his heart by only a few centimeters. Nancy Reagan was in the White House when the assassination attempt was made. She was rushed to the hospital. A policeman and 2 of Reagan's companions were seriously injured. Reagan's press secretary, James Brady, died of his head wounds after a short time. Injured were one of Reagan's bodyguards, Timothy McCarthy, and police officer Thomas K. Delahanty. While Vice President George Bush, who would hold office in the event of Reagan's prolonged incapacity, flew back to Washington, Secretary of State and ex-NATO Supreme Commander Alexander Haig took provisional command in Washington. Sweating and visibly shocked, he appeared on television. "The bullet hit the president's left lung," he said. But he was still conscious when he was taken to the operating room. Haig said, "Our allies have been briefed. Everything is going according to the contingency plans. There is no heightened state of readiness in the armed forces at this time. The heads of government of Western countries, including Chancellor Helmut Schmidt, President Valéry Giscard d'Estaing, and Prime Minister Margaret Thatcher, have expressed their shock at the assassination and sent their best wishes to Reagan."
Blick, Zürich, Tuesday, 31st March 1981.
Aha, and what time do you mean with 21:45 HRs? Is this according to American time or our time?
The time corresponds to Central European Time And to be sure, the statement applies to the amended time.
I do not understand that.
You know, nevertheless, that the so-called daylight savings time plays a large role in the countries of Europe.
Of course, but Switzerland has wisely kept itself from this for about 40 years.
Sure, but in the year 1981, it will be reintroduced.
That cannot be true. That is idiocy, since such a change only brings tremendous financial expenses with itself and, moreover, absolutely no energy conservation, as the super clever imagine this.
That is, unfortunately, correct, but the illogicalness of the Earth humans has previously had no end, not even before the dumbest stupidities.
The victims Reagan's three companions.
Washington, Reagan's three companions, who were also hit by bullets in the assassination attempt, are in hospital with serious injuries. Press Speaker James Brady had to undergo 5 hours of surgery because the bullet had severely damaged his brain. He showed weak reflexes afterwards, but is expected to remain disabled for life. He was first officially reported dead, which turned out to be a mistake. Safety agent Timothy McCarthy was hit in the stomach. His condition is said to be stable and hopeful. Policeman Thomas Delahanty is injured in the neck and shoulders. His case has been described as worrying.
No day for Oscar honors.
Because of the assassination attempt on President Ronald Reagan, the Oscar Film Awards ceremony was also postponed for 24 hours yesterday. Today is not a day on which honors should be given, producer Norman Jewison explained the decision.
Blick, Zürich, Wednesday, 1st April 1981.
The assassin, a former neo-Nazi.
Washington, 31st March. FPAP-DPA, a neo-Nazi from a wealthy family, disappointed over his party's lack of militancy, but with no career goals and severe mental disorders. That is the picture that is beginning to emerge after initial investigations into John Warnock Hinckley, who shot President Reagan on Monday. The 25-year-old was charged on Tuesday with attempted murder of the president, and an immediate psychiatric evaluation was ordered. According to information from the assassin's hometown of Denver, Colorado, the young man had resigned from the American National Socialist Party, NSPA, in 1979, which was not militant enough for him. According to a party leader, Hinckley mainly accused his fellow members of respecting legality. On the 9th of October, Hinckley was arrested at the airport in Memphis, Tennessee, in possession of 2 revolvers. On the same day, then-President Jimmy Carter had been scheduled to visit the city. After his release on bail, Hinckley disappeared from Tennessee. 4 days later, he bought 2 .22 caliber revolvers in Dallas, Texas. Hinckley had been trying unsuccessfully as a salesman since his release from high school. Barman, disc jockey, accountant and student. Since 1973, his parents had been worried about him because of increasingly frequent mental disorders. His father, Jack Hinckley, director of the oil company Vanderbilt Energy Corp., had repeatedly spoken to his colleagues about his problems with his son. Hinckley's family home in Colorado was sealed off by security officers soon after the assassination. Authorities, meanwhile, were trying to learn from the parents about their son. The parents are described as very wealthy, religious, conservative Republicans. They said through their lawyer that their son, John Jr., had been under psychiatric care, but that the seriousness of his illness was not clear. Friends with Vice President Bush. The Hinckley family supported the current Vice President George Bush financially during the election campaign. The assassin's brother was invited to dinner at the home of one of Bush's sons on Tuesday. The Hinckley family is described by the Bushes as very friendly.
Tagesanzeiger, Zürich, Wednesday, 1st April 1981.
You have spoken a true word.
Should I now tell you more?
Of course, because I still do not understand some things. You said, nevertheless, that Reagan, shortly after his assumption of office, will encounter profound enemies who will make themselves available against him in order to assassinate him. But now, you said that he will only be shot down by a single man, a student. Therefore, the danger for the president has not yet passed, and above all, it is also not clear to me as to whether or not he will still die after the surgery on his injury. You did not express yourself over this clearly, because you only mentioned the fact that the shot wound would not be directly fatal.
As always, you are very keen. I actually only spoke of the direct shot wound, which the American President Ronald Reagan will have to suffer, who can be healed again, however, by a surgical intervention lasting several hours. The health condition of this man after the operation will be in a satisfactory state, but then some complications will arise, which will make a second operation necessary. The recovery for the president will only begin afterwards, according to which he can then exercise his duties again in about a 2-week time period. Still, during his recovery time, the security bodies will discover that the assassin was, indeed, an outsider, but one who maintains contacts with other elements that are determined to kill the president. In this connection, the arrests of certain suspects will then be made, which will not help the security bodies, however. For this reason, the man will be further endangered because other elements will still stand against him before his election to the presidency, and will be concerned with the thought of killing him, which is why he runs the risk of falling victim to another assassination attempt.
Then the possibility still exists that he will still be killed and depart from this life?
This danger is quite great, but after the assassination attempt, security precautions will be so drastically tightened that he will escape the danger. However, I want to explain to you the most important data about this at a later time. For now, it is such that this President Reagan will be the empowered one who will bring the doubtful world peace that will only be laboriously preserved until then into wavering. For as a power-hungry person, he has been of the crazy acceptance for a long time that he can solve all problems through force, intrigues, and compulsion.
Ku Klux Klan relies on Reagan.
Columbus, Georgia, 23rd March. AP, the local chapters of the right-wing extremist, racist secret society Klu Klux Klan will be disbanded in 3 cities in the U.S. state of Georgia. According to a statement by one of their leaders, Calvin Reeves, because they have become superfluous in view of the changed balance of power in Washington. The Republican government would continue its work where the Ku Klux Klan would stop, Reeves explained. In addition to the group he led in Columbus, those in Macon and LaGrange would also be disbanded, and he expected other local organizations to follow suit in view of the new course adopted by the Republicans. Ku Klux Klan groups, see picture, had already campaigned for Reagan during the election campaign. Archive photo Keystone.
Tagesanzeiger Zürich, Tuesday, 24th March 1980.
Already for a long time, he has lived with this delusional idea that America must become the most powerful, all-controlling, as well as worldwide military power. Thus, after his assumption of office, he will try to realize this crazy notion, whereby he will use every harmful means available to realize his erroneous plans.
You said during a previous explanation that Reagan could virtually be a sign of a possibly coming downfall.
Sure, because he will be that empowered one who brings the laboriously preserved and very doubtful world peace into wavering, for which several of his predecessors strove. Thus, he is a bad sign for the beginning of the following armaments that will occur over the entire Earth, by which a third world war can then be struck during any later period in the third millennium. In accordance with his crazy actions, Everything in the world will line up very quickly, even more toward terror and anarchism. For misguided ones believed to recognize, in his hunger for power and in his tyranny, a means by which they could reach their confused and unrealistic goals. Even on the so-called normal citizens, everything will have its effects, which will especially be terribly expressed in Switzerland, in that crime will dramatically increase at a very alarming rate. According to which, in the month of April 1981 alone, in your homeland, so many murders of people will be committed as what will be the case throughout the whole year of 1980.
Huh? Do you mean that in April of 1981 in Switzerland there will be as many murders committed as altogether in the whole year of 1980?
Expression of accumulating destructive handicaps, new family drama, in the canton of Bern, 4 dead.
To Zurich, Bergdorf, 4th May. A new family drama in the canton of Bern. Barely 48 hours after a young man in Spiez strangled his wife and 9-year-old son and then threw himself into Lake Thun-Ta of Monday. A man in Bergdorf shot his 2 8- and 6-year-old daughters, his wife, and then himself with an assault rifle. For Joseph Duss von Wert, head of the Institute for Marriage and Family in Zurich, these two incidents are not isolated cases, but an expression of the recent general increase in acts of destruction. According to the Bergdorf Investigating Magistrate's Office, a man called the Bergdorf City Police early on Monday morning and said he had just killed his family and would now execute himself. He did not say why he had done it, but hung up the phone when the police officer on duty tried to dissuade him. The police then went out immediately and first came across the family's flat door, which was locked from the inside. The officers broke down the door, whereupon they found the 2 girls, the woman and the man, all shot in the head, lying in their beds. While the children were already dead when the doctor arrived, the parents were taken to hospital, where they too could only be found dead. The examining magistrate was unable to give the TA any details about the motive for the crime on Monday evening, but said that the man had apparently been struggling with psychological problems. No coincidence asked about this and similar cases in the past, which inevitably raised the suspicion of an unusual accumulation in recent times in the attentive observer, Joseph Duss von Wert told the TA that this was certainly no coincidence. He had never systematically followed the family dramas, but he had noticed that they were happening more and more often in young families and that the perpetrator was very often mentally disturbed. He had recently put forward the hypothesis, which would of course have to be examined for its truthfulness, that in general acts of destruction are increasing in the direction of self-destruction. For example, suicides, drug-related deaths, and various kinds of negligent self-inflicted accidents have been increasing noticeably in recent times. For Duss, the roots leading to family drama clearly lie in the suicidal intentions of its originator. It is known of suicides that they strive to wipe out their immediate surroundings as well. Duss can imagine 2 motives for this. Protection. One does not want to leave the relatives to shame. Revenge. Existence is not worth living for the suicide because the environment does not give him what he needs. It is precisely this latter motive that Duss observes in his practice, usually in a weakened form, not infrequently, an unwillingness to live that is projected onto an environment that no longer seems worth living in, relationship invalidity in marriage and family. And Duss also gives a gloomy prognosis for the future. The longer, the more many people really go crazy, even to the point of self-destruction. This is generally related to destructive tendencies in today's society, but especially to a war psychosis that is intensifying everywhere and the question of the meaning of life.
Tagesanzeiger, Zürich, Tuesday, 5th November 1981.
The blood wave continues. 81-year-old strangled on sofa robbery. Shots hit postman B.Y. Alfred V. Graf and Wolfgang Krebs.
Engelberg's G. Weinfelden T.G. The wave of bloodshed in Switzerland continues. Yesterday, a postman was seriously injured by a gunshot to the stomach during an armed robbery at the Engelberg post office. And in Weinfelden, police found an 81-year-old woman dead on her sofa, strangled. Shortly before 12 HRs at noon, two men of about 25 years old come into the small Engelberg post office. "Give me all the money," they shout in the local dialect. Postman Johann Steiner, 50, gets up from a chair and stands in front of the two strangers. A large caliber pistol cracks. Steiner collapses, a bullet in his stomach, bleeding. The perpetrators flee from the bar because the postman manages to set off the alarm. They try to escape in a Ford Transit. The vehicle is locked. Nevertheless, when the police arrive, the two have already disappeared without a trace. Postman Johann Steiner is seriously injured in the St. Gallen Cantonal Hospital. Early Tuesday morning, neighbors on Storchenstrasse in Weinfelden notice that the 81-year-old widow Martha Keller is not getting her milk from the shop as usual. They look in the two-family house and find the old woman lying dead on the sofa. She has been strangled. Her flat on the first floor was ransacked. The police are searching for 23-year-old Felix Scheiwiller. He is the nephew of the murdered woman and comes from Münchweilen. A spokesperson told Blick, "We have to assume that this is a relationship crime." The suspected perpetrator was probably looking for money at the old woman's house.
Blick, Zurich, Wednesday, 6th May 1981.
That is what I said.
Man, oh man, that will be so cheerful.
These are only the other following signs of the coming and slowly approaching global decline. But the signs will pile up very rapidly after the recovery of the U.S. president, because soon after this, criminal elements in captivity will try to obtain a political status. Irish Republican Army prisoners, murderers, and other serious criminals will try, with difficulty and through hunger strikes, to extort the British government in order to be able to be considered as political prisoners. The Englishmen, however, will remain unyielding, according to which, in the first days of May, 1981, the first criminal hunger strike will die out, as it will already happen weeks before in Germany, where the same method of anarchist criminals will be used to extort the government. But the hunger strike will also lead one criminal to his death, which will occur with the criminal Bobby Sands, who will be the first of the Irish Republican Army criminals to die of hunger, and then in a few days the next striker will follow him to death.
Third IRA activist dies after hunger strike. Was it also really a voluntary death? By our correspondent Thomas Byland.
London, 21st May. The third IRA hunger striker died in Belfast's Maze prison on Thursday night. McCreesh, 24, had not eaten since the 22nd of March. Another hunger striker, Patsy O'Hara, who had begun his hunger strike with McCreesh, fell into a coma on Thursday. The recent starvation death of an IRA prisoner led to sporadic unrest in the province. McCreesh was arrested in 1976 while preparing an ambush for the security forces with other IRA terrorists. He was sentenced to 14 years in prison for attempted murder. His body was taken in the customary procession from the hospital to the house on Thursday. His coffin, covered in the Irish tricolor and wearing the IRA's black beret and gloves, was carried by family members. About 1,000 persons followed the funeral procession. His funeral will take place on Saturday. In a final message, McCreesh had urged his countrymen to desist from further violence. A renewed appeal for peace also came from Cardinal O'Fiech, Primate of Ireland, who condemned the violence on all sides and called on the Thatcher government to be more flexible about the Mays prison regime. Patsy O'Hara fell into deep unconsciousness on Thursday, his 61st day without food. His family members have been called to his bedside. His passing is expected to be hourly. Another hunger striker, who has been on hunger strike for 10 days, had to be transferred to hospital on Thursday because of internal bleeding. It was not clear on Thursday evening whether he was resisting necessary medical treatment. Unrest in Belfast's Catholic neighborhoods flared up again on Thursday, although, as with the deaths of Bobby Sands and Francis Hughes, it did not reach the proportions feared. Local elections were held in Northern Ireland on Wednesday and Thursday. Early results suggest that the unrest of recent weeks has had a polarizing effect. Ian Paisley on the side of the Protestant Loyalist Unionists and the Republicans on the other side seem to be gaining ground at the expense of the more moderate Social Democratic and Labour parties. BD. The death of the third IRA hunger striker has a new flavor compared to the deaths of his two predecessors, in that the authorities in the Northern Ireland Department insist he was prepared to break the hunger strike last weekend. McCreish's family, after visiting the hunger striker in Mays prison, had described corresponding pronouncements by the prison authorities as untrue and demanded the replacement of two persons who were looking after McCreish. Tragically for him, the question of what McCreish really wanted last Saturday is only academic. But the incident once again raises the question of the voluntariness of the decision to starve to death. The fact that the wavering will of a dying man is not used by relatives to save the hunger striker by any means is another deeply frightening sign of the psychological and also physical terror that reigns in Northern Ireland.
Tagesanzeiger, Zürich, Friday, 22nd May 1939.
Northern Ireland. Fourth prisoner has already died. 400 want to starve themselves to death.
Belfast. With unbending fanaticism, Northern Ireland's terrorists continue their hunger strike action. Patrick O'Hara died in Belfast's Mays prison last night, a few hours after his fellow inmate Raymond McCreish. The two had refused any food for 61 days. Two new hunger strikers have already taken their place. If the British government does not give in, the IRA will continue its action until all 400 prisoners are dead. The terrorists are demanding that London recognize them as political prisoners. After the death of the fourth hunger striker, the Irish Liberation Army INLA, of which Patrick O'Hara was a member, threatened severe reprisals against all sectors of the British regime in Ulster. A few hours later, violent riots broke out in several northern Irish towns. Youth Catholics attacked police officers and British soldiers with gunfire, hand grenades, and firebombs. At least 12 human beings, including 6 police officers, were injured. 4 of them were hit by homemade hand grenades. These grenades are made from cans into which nails and explosives are soldered. Arsonists destroyed 12 buildings in Londonderry alone, including bars, shops, and travel agencies. A youth protester succumbed to serious injuries yesterday. He was reportedly hit by hard rubber bullets fired by the police. The first serious unrest followed the death of Bobby Sands, who died on the 5th of May after 66 days of hunger strikes. Exactly 1 week later, the IRA prisoner Francis Hughes died. The British government does not want to give in to the IRA. It fears a new flare-up of the Civil War as in 1972, when the IRA prisoners were recognized as political prisoners.
Blick, Zürich, Tuesday, 23rd May 1981.
But all this is only the beginning of the labor pains. starting in the year 1981 of the oncoming worldwide disaster, degenerated terrorism, and destruction, as well as various wars that will be released and waged worldwide by the USA, which will, for the time being, lead to the fact that the Earth will be afflicted by a very malignant, huge arms race. But this has already been inexorably set in motion. Thus, it can hardly be prevented anymore. We will, indeed, do everything permissible to alleviate an impending catastrophe, but we cannot prevent it by force, as we are not authorized to intervene directly in the crazy machinations of the Earth humans and their governments. For this reason, we also cannot prevent or alleviate the assassination attempts on the so-called high-ranking personalities, to whom presidents and ministers, etc., will fall victim, and concerning these facts, Italy, as always, will hold a leading role through the criminal organization, Red Brigades, and the Mafia.
Red Brigades declare death sentence.
Naples, 9th July. SDA, AFP, the local Christian Democrat politician Ciro Cirillo, who was kidnapped by the Red Brigades in Naples on the 27th of April, has been sentenced to death by his kidnappers. A corresponding communique from the Red Brigades was found on Thursday after an anonymous call to the Neapolitan daily newspaper Il Mattino. Cirillo is accused by the terrorists of being responsible for the deportation of workers from Naples. The communique goes on to say that the execution of the death sentence could be prevented under two conditions: work for the unemployed and confiscation of the empty houses of the employers for the homeless from last autumn's earthquake disaster. Only on Monday, an industrialist kidnapped by the Red Brigades, the Montedison director Giuseppe Tagliercio, was found murdered near Venice.
Tagesanzeiger, Zürich, Tuesday, 2nd June 1991.
But the members of these political and criminal organizations will fatally prove to be strictly devout Catholics. And on the 13th of May, 1981, a low blow will be dealt to them which will give them something to think about. Namely, when their alleged spiritual head becomes seriously injured by an assassination attempt of a sought-after Turkish assassin.
John Paul II survives assassination attempt.
Vatican City, 13th May. AP, in the assassination attempt in St. Peter's Square in Rome, where Pope John Paul II was struck down by 23-year-old Turkish terrorist Mehmet Ali Agca in front of more than 10,000 faithful and tourists at about 17 hers on Wednesday afternoon. The head of the Catholic Church suffered 5 gunshot wounds, but they do not appear to be serious. According to Luigi Candia, director of the Gemelli Clinic, where John Paul was admitted immediately after the attack, a 4-hour operation was successfully completed in the evening. It had required blood transfusions, but had proceeded without any particular complications. Professor Luigi Candia explained that a bullet had penetrated the Pope's body, causing a wound on entry and exit. Part of the intestine had to be removed. The Pope had also suffered 2 minor injuries to his right arm and another to his left hand. This is an overhaul of the earlier version of Vatican Radio, which had reported that 2 bullets had been removed during the surgical procedure. Candia explained that there were no bullets in the Pope's body. Thus, it remained unclear how many shots were fired from the alleged murder weapon, a Browning 9mm caliber. The Italian police arrested the Turkish citizen Mehmet Ali Agca as the suspected shooter. He was not carrying any papers, so that his identity could not be clearly established. During interrogation, he was said to have repeatedly said that he did not care about life at all. According to reports by the semi-official Turkish agency Anatolia, the arrested man is probably identical with the Turk of the same name who murdered the editor-in-chief of the newspaper Milliyet, Abdi İpekçi, on the open street in Istanbul on the 1st of February 1978. According to Turkish press reports, Aga had already sworn to kill the Pope in a letter he left behind when he escaped from the Istanbul military prison in 1979, shortly before the Pope's visit to Turkey at that time. Aga escaped from the military prison with the help of emigrant non-commissioned officers who, like him, belonged to the radical right-wing camp. He himself is considered a supporter of Alparslan Türk's radical right-wing National Action Party. Turkey's and 219 of his supporters are facing charges of attempting to overthrow the government in Turkey and face the death penalty. Aga is said to have lived in the Federal Republic of Germany and to be married to a German woman. According to information from Ankara, Turkey is said to have sought his extradition. However, the German authorities are said to have hesitated to act on the request because of his family status. According to the Vatican, the shots were fired at 1717 HRs. Just as the Pope was being driven in a jeep to the open-air general audience in St. Peter's Square. The Pope had been hit twice in the side, at about the level of his pancreas. John Paul slumped and was caught by his secretary Stanislaw Dziwisz. The jeep immediately drove back to the Vatican grounds with the injured man, from where he was taken by ambulance to the Gemelli Clinic and immediately driven to the operating theater. Eyewitnesses reported that the Pope was conscious when he arrived at the clinic. Italy's president, Sandro Pertini, left the Quirinal Palace after the news broke to go to the Gemelli Clinic, where the Pope's operation was underway at the time. In St. Peter's Square, where some of those gathered had fled after the assassination attempt, those who stayed behind were asked over loudspeakers to pray for the Pope's recovery. The Italian trade unions announced after the assassination that they would call a half-hour strike throughout Italy to protest against the outrageous act of violence. The Christian Democratic, Socialist, and Communist-led trade union federations simultaneously expressed their solidarity with the Pope and their hope for his speedy recovery.
Tagesanzeiger Zürich, 14th May 1960.
Assassination attempt on Pope.
13th May. Pope John Paul II is critically wounded by 3 shots in an assassination attempt in St. Peter's Square in Rome. The Turkish assassin, Mehmet Ali Agca, is arrested and sentenced to life imprisonment on the 22nd of July, 1981. The 23-year-old Agca fires a pistol at the Pope from close range as he is about to enter St. Peter's Square for his weekly general audience, standing in an open car. John Paul II is slightly wounded by 2 shots to the index finger of his left hand and to his right arm, and is shot in the abdomen. He falls, covered in blood, into the arms of his secretary, Don Stanislaw Dziwisz, and is immediately admitted to the Gemelli Hospital in Rome, which is close to the Vatican. After a 5-hour operation, the doctors describe his state of health as worrying. It took the head of the church several months to recover from his severe abdominal and intestinal injuries. In addition to the Pope, 2 women, a U.S. American and a Jamaican, are injured in the assassination attempt. The shots briefly caused panic in St. Peter's Square, where tens of thousands of faithful had been awaiting the Holy Father. When it was announced over the loudspeakers that the Pope had been injured, the faithful began to pray together. The assassination attempt on the head of the Catholic Church causes consternation worldwide. Well-known politicians from East and West send wishes for his recovery to Rome, and in many places supplication services are held for his recovery. In his first message from the hospital, John Paul II forgave the assassin. After his recovery, he also visited him in prison. The assassin Aga is considered a supporter of the right-wing extremist National Action Party (MHP). In April 1980, he was sentenced to death in absentia for the murder of the editor-in-chief of the left-liberal Turkish newspaper Milliyet. After his arrest, he managed to escape from prison. At first, there is only speculation about the motives for the assassination. Mehmet Ali Agca explained to the Italian police as justification for his act. "I shot the Pope to protest against the imperialism of the Soviet Union and the United States and the genocides they committed in El Salvador and Afghanistan." Even before the Pope's visit to Turkey in autumn 1979, he had threatened to assassinate the Holy Father. Addressing a Turkish newspaper, he wrote, "Fearing the formation of a new political, military and economic force by Turkey and its Arab brothers, the West, without hesitation, sent John Paul II to Turkey in the disguise of a religious leader as a commander of crusaders. If this senseless visit is not annulled, I will surely kill the Pope." The assassination attempt on the Pope comes 31 months after he was elected to succeed Pope John Paul I, the 33-day Pope, who died unexpectedly at the time. The election of Karol Wojtyła as Pope on the 16th of October 1978 was considered a sensation. He is the first non-Italian incumbent since the Dutchman Hadrian VI in 1522. The proposal for his election came mainly from Austrian and German cardinals. The first Polish Pope, he was born in Wadowice on the 18th of May 1920, became Archbishop of Krakow in early 1964, and in 1967 became the second Polish cardinal, alongside Cardinal Stefan Wyszynski. Since his election as Pope, John Paul II has made extensive apostolic journeys to all continents. Only at the beginning of the year did he visit Southeast Asia 16. Not least because of his many trips abroad, during which the Pope repeatedly calls for solidarity and respect for human rights. He enjoys great popularity among believers all over the world.
Chronik, 1918. Chronik Verlag. Dortmund, Wednesday, 13th May, 1918.
But also in
Do you mean that the Pope will be shot by an already known assassin?
This is why the assassin hated the Holy Father by Gregor Fust.
The Turk Mehmet Ali Asgar 23, who shook the world with his attack on the Holy Father, planned to assassinate the Pope a year and a half ago. The fanatical right-wing extremist, sentenced to death for murder in his home country, is being interrogated non-stop by the Roman police. He described the Pope as a crusade commander who, under the mask of a religious leader, was in the service of the imperialists. Although the Italian authorities had been warned via Interpol a week ago, the assassin managed to enter Italy with a false passport made out in the name of Faruk Ozgun.
Was the assassin in Switzerland?
The Browning pistol with which he fired the fatal shots at the Pope on Wednesday evening was carried by the Turk. He arrived in Milan from Majorca on a chartered plane last Saturday. From there, Asgar traveled to Rome, where he checked into a cheap hotel in the center of the city. He is said to have previously stayed in Germany and possibly also in Switzerland. The Pope assassin comes from a Bohème family in Malatya province. He briefly studied economics at Istanbul University, then joined the far-right National Action Party of former Supreme and Deputy Prime Minister Alparslan Türkeş. Türkeş is currently standing trial for murder before a military court. The prosecutor has demanded the death penalty for him and numerous supporters. Mehmet Ali Asgar was also a member of the dreaded youth group Grey Wolves, which is close to this party.
Holy war against everything non-Islamic.
The Grey Wolves are among the most militant fascists in Turkey. Their thugs and hit squads not only rage among political opponents at home, They also carry out numerous attacks and murders abroad, especially among Turkish guest workers in the Federal Republic of Germany. Their ideology is rooted in Khomeini-style Islamic fundamentalism. In a holy war, they fight everything that is not absolutely Muslim. The assassination attempt on the Pope also caused outrage among the 32,000 or so Turks in Switzerland. In their circles, it was said that Askar had been expelled from the Grey Wolves movement. He is a madman and has brought our whole nation into disrepute. The Pope is a kind human being. Whoever touches him must be destroyed, Ali Genchoglu, 33, told Blick in Zurich. Even the Grey Wolves cannot have any sympathy for the Pope assassin, Ahmed Z said. Mehmet Ab Askar was formally charged by the Italian prosecution yesterday. He risks life in prison for attempted murder of a head of state. He was also charged with the attempted murder of 2 tourists and unlawful possession of weapons of war. Meanwhile, investigating authorities are puzzling over whether Askar is a lone perpetrator or whether he was supported by backers. The Pope assassin himself went on hunger strike yesterday. He declared, "My life has no meaning now."
Blick Zurich, Friday, 15th of May, 1981.
He will be dangerously injured by the assassination attempt. But I will tell you more about this later, because before this happens, there will still be some other things that will occur that should at least cause the human beings in Europe to pause for thought.
John Paul II in sickbed.
Rome, 20th May, Reuter AP. For the first time since the assassination attempt, Pope John Paul II was free of fever on Wednesday and able to eat solid food again. According to official reports, doctors at Gemelli Hospital allowed the head of the Roman Catholic Church to eat a boiled pear and vegetable soup. The Pope had been walking up and down in the hospital room talking a lot and showing optimism, he said. Chief physician Emilio Tresalti said that the specialist treating the Pope, who was seriously injured by several gunshots last Wednesday, would probably declare his life to be in extreme danger on Thursday. According to the pro-communist newspaper Paese Sera, the Pope was probably more hurt than by the assassin's bullets by the news of the outcome of the abortion referendum in Italy, in which a majority voted to keep the current, relatively liberal abortion laws. Picture AP.
Tagesanzeiger, Zürich, Thursday, 29th May, 1980.
Thus, it will happen that at the end of the month of April, 1981, and in early May of 1981, in Austria, namely in Vienna, a head of the city will be shot, while afterwards, in Germany, a minister will also be robbed of his life by shots.
Minister's murder was an accident.
Frankfurt. The revolutionary cells have claimed responsibility for the murder of Hessian economics minister Heinz Herbert Carey. In 2 letters, the perpetrators declare that the murder was an accident. They had only wanted to punish Carey by shooting him in the legs for his transport and energy policies.
Blick Zurich, Tuesday, 2nd June 1981.
And what are the names of these 2?
Their names are not important, and for certain reasons, I cannot officially reveal them.
Then just do not.
You will also be less burdened through this. But listen further. You know the truth about Israel, and especially about its politics. Due to Reagan's insane politics, Israel, which indeed wants to gain control of the country of Palestine by all means, will thereby allow itself to be misguided to reveal its true face. Especially the criminal and national president, Begin, will betray his true German hostile attitude and will try to compromise the German politicians with lies and intrigues. And indeed, he will do this already before the assassination attempt on the Pope will occur, and before, in France, the new national president named Mitterrand will be elected, who then likewise pursues a policy which leads toward the destruction of the nation and the earth, as will be the case with the American president, Reagan. Only, the new French president will handle these matters differently than Reagan.
Mitterrand is the new president.
Paris, France has a socialist president. According to initial projections, François Mitterrand won the election yesterday with 52% of all votes. Valéry Giscard d'Estaing, 55, the incumbent head of state, fell by the wayside with 48%. Unemployment and inflation, but not least also his diamond affair, cost him the super job in the Élysée. With the surprisingly good election of the socialist leader Mitterrand, the French gave expression to their disappointment with Giscard's policies, which were criticized as unjust and unsocial. Even big business, the powerful in the French economy, had shown restraint in their support for Giscard in the last weeks before the election. Mitterrand's victory is considered a sensation because of his big lead over Giscard. It will boost France's economy, bringing in particular greater social spending and higher taxes for the rich. Helmut Hubacher, 55, president of the Swiss Social Democrats, told Blick yesterday, "This election result is above all gratifying because it does not confirm the conservative wave in Europe that many had hoped for."
Blick Zürich, Montag, 11th May 1981.
You mean, therefore, that they, during the year 1981, will let the cat out of the bag?
Sure, and indeed with absolute certainty. But up to this point in time, the Germans will not realize that their reparation attempts up to that hour have been totally wrong, and that with Begin they have nourished a deadly brood of vipers at their bosom. A brood of vipers of a quite especially poisonous kind, which constantly just aimed to forcefully pull everything into its possession, whatever it could get its hands on, with lies, deceit, and intrigues, which has been the case for a long time with this man.
Government publishes economic report on the state of the nation, formal handover of office to Mitterrand by our correspondent Hans-Ulrich Meyer.
Paris, 20th May. On Thursday, 21st May, Paris will be marked by the handover of the presidency, which is linked to various ceremonies. On Tuesday evening, outgoing President Giscard d'Estaing addressed a farewell message to the French people on television. At the last meeting of the Council of Ministers on Wednesday, the Barre government published its final economic report on the state of France. What is most noteworthy about this changing of the guard at the Élysée is that, for the first time in the Fifth Republic, there is a formal and ceremonial handover of office between a deposed and a newly elected president. This is thanks to Giscard's correct attitude. Like de Gaulle, he could also have taken the popular vote in 1969 as an insult to His Majesty and left informally. De Gaulle's departure lacked any grandeur at the time. Immediately after his referendum defeat, he threw in the towel, moved to Colombey, and in the meantime had material and files transported in lorries at night. Interim President Poher moved into the Élysée completely helplessly and found hardly any paper or writing materials. De Gaulle had also not informed him in any way, which bordered on the criminal, about the handling of the strategic deterrent weapon. This time everything went normally. Giscard d'Estaing said goodbye to the French people in a short televised message on Tuesday evening. He thanked them for the trust they had placed in him and noted that during his presidency he had been able to preserve France's peace, freedom, and state institutions. Freedom and state institutions. "I was anxious," he elaborated, "that the transition should take place according to the rules of Republican continuity, which is why I will receive François Mitterrand myself at the Élysée." Giscard went on to say that he would remain at his country's disposal. When the audience expected the television cameras to be switched off, The speech was followed by a somewhat theatrical ending. Giscard rose and departed, leaving an abandoned presidential chair behind, which remained in the picture for a long moment. On Wednesday, the Barre government published the expected final economic balance sheet. This situation report essentially supports the thesis that France has just had to struggle with an economic crisis, but has been relatively successful in this struggle. In a conclusion, the outgoing head of government summarizes what is essential to him. He notes, among other things, in contrast to the other EC countries, France was also able to record an increase in national income during the crisis, plus 0.5% for 1981, and even plus 2.5% for 1982. The number of people looking for work also increased strongly in France in recent years, but less strongly than in the other EC countries. Wage increases were moderate, but allowed workers to maintain their purchasing power. The government budget deficit remained within narrow limits, and Social Security and financial balance. The foreign trade balance improved and reached a coverage ratio of 95.7% as of April. France's external debt is more than offset by assets. With currency reserves of 363 billion francs, the French franc had a strong and secure position in the European monetary system.
Tagesanzeiger, Zürich, Thursday, 21st May, 9 Uhr.
Perhaps those responsible ones in Germany and in the other countries of the earth will also finally recognize the truth, that namely, the original forefathers of the Israelis pursued this murderous method, to make drunk in pretended friendship those to be exploited in order to butcher and eliminate them in their drunken stupor.
For those quick of hearing and honestly knowing and searching, this was already known for thousands of years. It is also indeed written in the Bible.
Sure, but only for the quick of hearing and knowing ones. The know-it-alls and fantasizers never want, however, to see this factual truth. Perhaps the machinations of Begin in the year 1981 will finally bring about a change.
This is therefore not yet certain? I mean, that this change will come?
No, unfortunately not. And even if this should be the case, Israel will still gain the upper hand. This also is the sign that the Pope in Rome will soon begin to make common cause with the government of the land of Israel, which essentially belongs to Arabia, by which the Pope would be stupid enough not to recognize that he also is only exploited by Israel's powermongers as a means to an end for their dark and opaque plans. And just here I must briefly preempt the chronology of events, because something will be planned, particularly in connection with Begin's defamation of the German politicians, which will express the true face and the true attitude of the Israeli powermongers even more blatantly than the insult against the Germans. It will already be after the assassination attempt on the Pope when the Israeli state powers will commit a further crime of world-provoking nature. When, namely, Begin will insult the German politicians, he will only do so based on the calculation that he would be seen as a strong man who can afford to act in his criminal manner. It will indeed be due to his behavior that various reprimanding voices will be raised in various nations, but they truly are not meant seriously. Secretly, Menachem Begin will be, namely, admired and supported by those reprimanding him, whereby he will feel strong enough to drive his insults against the Germans to the utmost in order to win votes from his people. These insults, of course, are based only on malicious lies, but they will be well thought out and aimed toward one purpose: to keep secret the next and, at that point in time, already planned crime, namely, to lead a warlike offensive blow under the pretense of defense against the nation of Iraq, whereby somewhere during the time between June 7th and 9th, 1981, the nation of Iraq will be criminally attacked and bombarded by the Israeli Air Force, whereby their target of destruction will be an atomic power plant under construction.
Iraq, Israeli bombs on atomic plant.
In a surprise attack, units of the Israeli Air Force have bombed the Iraqi nuclear center of Tammuz near Baghdad and, according to them, completely destroyed the nuclear reactor Osirak. The Israeli government in Jerusalem announced yesterday that the destruction of the nuclear reactor, more than 1,000 kilometers away, had taken place on Sunday. The bombing was necessary because the reactor, supplied by France, was not intended for research purposes but for the production of nuclear bombs. The reactor was due to go into operation in July. With its attack, Israel had dealt the heaviest blow yet to the nuclear power plans of the Iraqi leadership. The target of the Iraqi bombs would have been Israel. This danger to the existence of the Israeli nation had to be averted. Iraq last night confirmed the Israeli attack on the nuclear center, but gave no details of the extent of the damage. The Zionist enemy had thus once again supported Iraq's wartime adversary Iran, a Baghdad government statement said. In September last year, the Tammuz nuclear center was bombed by the Iranians, allegedly with Israeli support. In Jerusalem, a government spokesman said the attack was carried out on Whit Sunday because it could be assumed that the foreign experts involved in the project would not be at the site that day. The Israeli blitz has sparked concerned reactions around the world. Egypt condemned the attack as irresponsible and unjustified. Jordan accused the Israelis of profiting from Iraq's war with Iran. And in Washington, the State Department declared that the bombing of the nuclear center near Baghdad was a very serious event.
Blick, Zurich, Tuesday, 9th June 1981.
Iraq, Israeli bombs on atomic plant. Poland, sharp threats from Moscow. Blick spoke to the Swiss strategy expert Kurt Gastiger.
Fear of war dominates the world. After the Israeli bombing of the Iraqi nuclear center near Baghdad, the political mood in the Middle East has once again approached boiling point. At the same time, the leadership in Poland is coming under increasing Soviet pressure. The Kremlin has issued an ultimatum to stop the course of renewal to finally counter the counter-revolution vigorously. Are new armed conflicts imminent? Will there be war again? Blick spoke to the Swiss strategy expert, Professor Kurt Gastiger, 52, of the Institute for International Studies in Geneva.
Russian pressure was predictable.
Hi, I am Blick.
Hi, I am Gastiger.
Mr. Gastiger, is the fear of war justified?
In Poland, what I have long predicted has obviously come to pass. Sooner or later, the Soviets will react harshly. It must be expected that the Soviet Union will probably increase its pressure before the coming party congress of the Polish Communists, and thus force a tightening of the internal course. For the time being, through economic pressure and support for the internal party opposition, whenever possible by non-military means.
And the situation in the Middle East?
In addition to the regional political, I attribute a global political significance to the bombing of the Iraqi nuclear center. One of the central problems of the 1980s has been addressed: the proliferation of nuclear armaments in the Third World.
Whereby Israel is also considered at least a potential nuclear power.
There are indications that Israel does indeed already have some nuclear bombs. On the other hand, Israel is trying by all means to disrupt and, if possible, prevent the development of a nuclear program in an Arab country. The bombing in Iraq will, as far as can be judged here now, cause a delay of 2 to 3 years. But the Iraqi reactor is working with highly enriched uranium. The production of at least one nuclear bomb will then be possible in a relatively short time.
Does Israel now not run the risk of becoming more and more isolated?
Certainly the Israeli position can be weakened, and not only in the Arab world. The problem of nuclear proliferation cannot be solved by military means. In this respect, I even believe that the Israeli action will be counterproductive. Sooner or later, an Arab country will go nuclear. The Arabs cannot respond.
Is a counterattack by the Arabs, who are divided among themselves, to be expected?
At the moment, I do not believe so. The Arab countries, neither on their own and even less together, are not even operationally prepared to take up arms against Israel. Libya, however, is a factor of uncertainty that has to be taken very seriously.
How does the Middle East problem present itself to the superpowers?
The U.S. certainly has a much greater influence than the Soviet Union. But the influence of the superpowers has decreased compared to 1967 and 1973. And the Americans have a great interest in good relations, especially with Saudi Arabia and Egypt. Certainly, Israel's confrontation with the Arab states has intensified.
Matthew Zurich, Wednesday, 10th June 1981.
How Israelis fooled the world bombing against atomic plant By Tevye S. Newman from Jerusalem.
The successful Israeli attack on Iraq's nuclear center near Baghdad turns out to have been a spectacular feat that simply left the enemy no chance. The 14 Israeli Air Force fighter jets F-4, F-15 and F-16 that took off on Sunday afternoon from the super-modern Etzion Air Base in the still Israeli-occupied Sinai wore Jordanian national emblems as camouflage. During the entire flight of almost 1,000 kilometers along the Jordanian-Saudi Arabian border, the pilots spoke only Arabic on the radio to deceive possible listeners. Completely unnoticed by the Iraqi air defenses, already defenseless against the weak Iranian Air Force, the Israeli placed their special bombs on the nuclear reactor and destroyed it. The fighter bombers apparently remained undetected even by American AWAC reconnaissance aircraft stationed in Saudi Arabia, the most modern in the world.
Blick, Zurich, Wednesday, 10th June 1981.
Ha! And naturally the responsible ones of some nations will be artificially excited again to preserve appearances.
Unfortunately, then it will also be so in this case.
Begin could then still reach his goal, because as usual, Israel, due to falsely induced pity, reparations, and due to the false humanitarianism of the people, and so forth, can continue to drive Begin's murderous deeds and his mania to gain national control of Palestine. He actually does honor to his origin, Hebrion. As I know, this designation stems from the ancient Lyran language and means gypsy. But this translation is not correct because actually, Hebrion in the ancient language, and therefore in Lyran, means Hebrion and not Hebrion. But Hebrion means the cast-off or cast-out scum.
Sure, that is correct. But now, continue to listen to what I will further report to you in chronological order and what I have already addressed. Pope John Paul II will be severely injured by an assassination attempt, which will likewise lead to the uncertainty that has already been addressed as to whether he will carry out his trip to Switzerland or not. Health-wise, this trip would, indeed, be quite possible for him after the assassination attempt, but the calculations do not show whether or not the responsible persons for the trip will approve of a trip to Switzerland at this time. The likelihood is that the trip will be cancelled and rescheduled. A repeated murderer of Turkish nationality by the name of Ahmed Ali Agca will have to bear the responsibility for the assassination attempt on the Pope, who will make several shots at the Pope and severely injure him. Although the injury will be severe, the Pope will survive the attack and the quick surgery that will follow. According to our calculations, this will happen during the period from the 12th to 14th of May, where the 13th of May of 1981, around the time of 1717 HRs, is the greatest probability. The Pope, and this is entirely certain, will survive. But only a week later, the Pope's bosom friend, Cardinal Wyszynski of Poland, will end his life, who, until then, will have driven his sectarian regime there for many years.
Poland mourns the death of Cardinal Wyszynski.
28th May. The primate of the Catholic Church in Poland, Cardinal Stefan Wyszynski, dies of cancer in Warsaw at the age of 80. On the 7th of July, 1981, the Vatican appoints Wyszynski's former secretary, Józef Glemp, as his successor. Stefan Wyszynski, born on the 3rd of August 1901 in Zuzela, eastern Poland, became Bishop of Lublin in 1946. In 1948, the Pope appointed him as the youngest bishop to be Archbishop of Gniezno and Warsaw, and thus Primate of Poland. From 1953 to 1956, he was imprisoned for resisting the Stalinist leadership's aim of eliminating the Church as a power factor through reprisals and Gewalt. In the domestic political crisis in the country, Wyszynski has always sought a balance between state and church since 1980. He is regarded as a symbol of the Polish Catholic Church's unbroken will to assert itself against the Communist Party's claim to power. His successor, Józef Glemp, announced that he would continue the mediating role between the independent trade union Solidarity, the Church, and the government. Glemp was born in Inowrocław on the 18th of December 1928 and has been Bishop of Warmia since 1979.
Chronik 1978, Chronik Verlag Dortmund, 28th May 1980.
The Cardinal's death will take place around the same time when President Reagan's assassin will make a failing suicide attempt with medicines.
Reagan assassin attempted suicide.
Washington, 28th of May. Reuter, the 25-year-old John Hinckley, who severely wounded American President Ronald Reagan on the 30th of March by shooting him several times, attempted suicide on Wednesday, according to the Justice Department. He had taken an overdose of a painkiller, a spokesman announced. He added that the assassin had recovered after medical treatment. He was not in danger of dying.
Tagesanzeiger, Zürich, Friday 29th May 1980.
Oh, so he will want to kill himself.
With certainty, but the attempt will remain just as such, as I explained. Only a few days after these incidents will the government again turn to the country of Iran in order to excite the interest of the world public again.
Aha, it will probably start again as a result of this Khomeini.
It will be something like that because some other time he will incite the Iranian people against the leadership, this time against the President Bani Sadr, who will take over this role as a politically moderate person in Iran.
Incriminating material against Bani Sadr published.
Beirut, 1st June. AP. Iranian President Abolhassan Bani Sadr has acted unconstitutionally in several cases. This was announced on Monday by the spokesman of an arbitration commission set up by revolutionary leader Ayatollah Ruhollah Khomeini. This commission had been appointed by Khomeini to settle disputes between Bani Sadr, who is considered liberal, and the clerical conservative Prime Minister Mohammad Ali Raja. The commission's spokesman said that the president had violated Khomeini's order to refrain from provocative statements for the duration of the war with Iraq. He also said that Bani Sadr had refused to confirm the parliament's appointments of top officials to individual ministries. The spokesperson announced that the commission had decided by majority vote to hand over the available evidence to the prosecution. Whether this means that charges will be brought against Bani Sadr was not clear at first.
Tagesanzeiger, Zürich, Tuesday, 2nd June 1983.
Anti-Bani Sadr demonstration, dead and injured.
Tehran. Heavy clashes between fanatical Khomeini demonstrators and supporters of Iranian President Bani Sadr 47, who is fighting for his political survival, claimed several lives and left countless injured. Over 100,000 Iranians heeded the call of the fanatical Muslim leaders and took to the streets. Only a few followers of Bani Sadr, on the other hand, dared to demonstrate for the president. Revolutionary leader Ayatollah Khomeini, 81, had threatened them with the merciless military courts. Yesterday, the National Parliament in Tehran began a special session to discuss Bani Sadr's incompetence. The aim is to fully oust and remove the head of state, who has been discredited for his criticism of dictatorial Muslim leaders. A huge crowd followed the MP's anti-Bani Sadr show.
Blick, Zurich, Wednesday, 3rd June 1981.
This means that he will not pursue the murderous lines of the insane Ayatollah and will, thus, slowly fall into disgrace with this and with the people.
Bani Sadr under Khomeini's fire.
Tehran, Iran's President Bani Sadr is coming under increasing fire. Recently, revolutionary leader Khomeini and his conservative Muslims have accused him of violating the Iranian constitution. Khomeini does not want to accept Bani Sadr's criticism. The public prosecutor's office is now to investigate the president.
Blick, Zurich, Wednesday, 3rd June 1981.
His fall will take place in the time between the 10th and the 15th of June 1981, whereby he will then be forced to flee.
Khomeini trims Bani Sadr's might.
Tehran, Persia's Ayatollah Khomeini has appointed a provisional commander-in-chief of the Iranian army. He entrusted General Falalo, the armed forces chief of staff, with the post. According to a report by Radio Tehran, Falahi is to hold the post until a new commander-in-chief is appointed. The day before yesterday, Khomeini surprisingly removed President Abdul Hassan Bani Sadr from supreme command of the army after previous disagreements, thus depriving him of his power.
Blick, Zurich, Friday, 12th of June 1981.
The Iranian people and a blood judgment will rise up against him and demand his death.
Iranians call for Bani Sadr's death.
Tehran, now believers in Iran are calling for the death of President Bani Sadr. At Friday prayers, large crowds repeatedly chanted, "Allah, O Akbar, God is great, Khomeini the leader." Death to Bani Sadr. The president, deposed by the Ayatollah as commander-in-chief of the armed forces, has not commented on his loss of power.
Blick, Zurich, Saturday, 13th June 1981.
Bani Sadr fears for his life.
Tehran, Iran's President Bani Sadr, 48, fears for his life and disappeared underground.
After his warning of a coup d'etat in installments, he had to fly.
This led to heavy clashes between Khomeini and Bani Sadr supporters.
Blick, Zurich, Monday, 15th June 1981.
Bani Sadr should confess remorse.
Tehran, Iran's revolutionary leader Ayatollah Khomeini has called on President Abul Hassan Bani Sadr, who was deposed as army commander-in-chief, to publicly criticize himself. He had told this gentleman several times that his rebellious followers would bring him to ruin. Bani Sadr has since gone into hiding. He is said to have taken off abroad on board a military plane.
Blick, Zurich, Tuesday, 16th of June 1981.
Noose closes around Bani Sadr's neck.
Tehran, the first step towards the removal of Iranian President Abul Hassan Bani Sadr. Parliament decided to convene a session within 24 hours to publicly debate the political incompetence of the man in hiding. In the meantime, 10 of Bani Sadr's confidants have been arrested. A bomb exploded at the presidential palace. Demonstrators demanded Bani Sadr's death.
Blick, Zurich, Wednesday, 17th June, 1981.
Bani Sadr deposed.
Tehran, Iran's progressive head of state Abul Hassan Bani Sadr, 47, was ousted yesterday by the conservative Muslims around the aged revolutionary leader Ayatollah Khomeini, 81. Only one member of the Iranian parliament dared to vote for Bani Sadr, 12 abstained, and 177 voted against the head of state. Now Khomeini can depose him and put him before a revolutionary court. One of these courts yesterday executed 15 of Bani Sadr's followers for demonstrating in support of the head of state over the weekend. There is still no trace of Bani Sadr. Rumors that he had fled to Switzerland proved unfounded.
Blick, Zurich, Monday, 22nd June, 1981.
Bani Sadr deposed. Turmoil in Iran.
21st June, the liberal president of Iran, Abul Hassan Bani Sadr, is deposed by religious leader Ayatollah Khomeini for incapacity. He is succeeded on the 24th of July by the previous Prime Minister Mohammad Ali Raja, 30.8. p. 130. The clashes between Bani Sadr's opponents and supporters continue to escalate. On the 28th of June, a bomb attack is carried out on the headquarters of the Islamic Republican Party IRR. With the removal of Bani Sadr from power, the Islamic fundamentalists of the Mullah Party IRP under Rajahi consolidate their political might in the country. The arbitrary regime of terror with mass executions and brutal suppression of the opposition continues. 20.9. Pachu 146. Bani Sadr's deposition is the culmination of a domestic power struggle that has been going on for 1.5 years between Bani Sadr, the Unkin People's Mujahideen, as well as the Marxist Fedayeen on the one hand, and the supporters of the IRP on the other. While the liberals under Bani Sadr and the Unkin opposition groups advocate a secularized state in which religion has no direct political influence, the anti-European traditionalists of the IRP under Rajai and the radical mullahs strive for a state whose politics and daily life are oriented solely towards the strict Islamic religion. Bani Sadr had repeatedly held the mullah's party responsible for oppression and torture in the country and called on the people to resist the Khomeini regime. After he was deposed, an arrest warrant was issued for him, but he managed to flee to France. In exile in Paris, he formed the National Council of Resistance for the Freedom and Independence of the Democratic Islamic Republic of Iran. Meanwhile, the acts of violence in Iran, terror and counter-terror, continue. On the 28th of June 1981, 74 human beings were killed in an explosive attack on the IRP headquarters. Among the victims were also the IRP Secretary General Mohammad Hossein Beheshti, as well as 4 ministers, 6 deputy ministers, and 27 members of parliament.
Chronik 1918, Chronik Verlag, Dortmund, 21st June 1918.
Thus, the usual approach of underage criminals and mentally incompetent ones.
Sure. This event in Iran will not be the only one at this time, because only hours after the attack on President Bani Sadr, in the south of the same country, a severe earthquake will take the lives of 7,000 people.
Earthquakes shake Iran.
11th of June. In the southern Iranian province of Kerman, a severe earthquake kills about 2,000 human beings. The city of Golbaf is 95% destroyed by the tremors, which reach 6.8 points on the Richter scale. A month later, Iran was hit by more earthquakes. Fortunately, the first quake occurred in the morning, when many inhabitants of the province were on the streets or working in the fields. Since most of the simple houses in this region have insufficiently fastened roof structures, the number of victims would have increased considerably at night. The hospitals are overcrowded with hundreds of injured people. At the end of July, there are 2 more earthquakes in southeastern Iran, measuring 6.5 to 7 on the upwardly open Richter scale. 6 large villages, including again the mountainous province of Kerman, are almost completely buried. At least 6,000 human beings are killed.
Chronik 39, Chronik Verlag, Dortmund, 11th June 1911.
Ousted head of state outsmarted Khomeini, dramatic chase by Iran jet fighters.
Paris, pursued by Iranian Air Force jet fighters, ousted Persian President Abul Hassan Bani Sadr 48, has managed to escape to Paris in a hijacked plane. In a spectacular coup, the hapless head of state outwitted his former protector and later arch-enemy Ayatollah Khomeini. After 17 months of power struggle with the parliament, Sadr had been deposed in June because of his failures as organizer of the war against Iraq. He went underground. While Khomeini believed he was hiding somewhere in the northwest, Sadr was in fact living in the heart of the capital, Tehran. He had shaved off his mustache and even walked the streets without being recognized. Members of a Marxist guerrilla organization kept him hidden. In collaboration with the army, of which Sadr was the supreme commander, they also organized the escape. A tanker plane built in the USA was taken in a surprise attack on a military base near Tehran yesterday night. The fuel tanks filled to the brim and the 4-man crew forced to take off. On the flight towards Turkey, the situation became dicey. Fighter planes of the armed forces climbed up and took up the pursuit. Sadr's plane, which was piloted by the same pilot who had flown the deposed Shah into exile in Egypt in 1979, was already too far ahead, and the fighters had to turn back at the border. The plane made a diversion via Turkey, Cyprus, Greece, and Italy to reach France, where it landed at the Évreux Air Base near Paris at dawn. Sadr was granted political asylum, and the Ayatollahs immediately demanded the extradition of the traitor. Sadr is married to a French woman. He owns a house in Kachan near Paris, where his 2 daughters live. He also lived there when he was Khomeini's closest advisor in 1978-79 and prepared the overthrow of the Shah's regime with him. At that time, Khomeini resided in Neauphle-le-Château, also near the French capital.
Blick, Zurich, Thursday, 30th of June 1981.
And where will this earthquake take place?
According to our calculations, in the area around Kerman, in a region, thus, that you know very well.
Possibly over 1,000 human beings died under rubble. Iran, catastrophic earthquake.
Tehran, 11th June. Reuters, AP, a major earthquake in Iran's southeastern province of Kerman may have buried and killed more than 1,000 human beings on Thursday, authorities estimated. Governor General Abul Hussein Saveh gave the figure to the Reuters news agency in a telephone conversation. He said the worst affected area was the small town of Golbag, 70 kilometers southeast of Kerman, with a population of 1,000 Assalers and villages in the surrounding area. According to Saveh, about 40,000 human beings live in the greater Golbag area. However, like the Red Crescent Relief Organization, he could not say how extensive the damage was that was caused by what is probably the strongest earthquake in Iran in 3 years. According to other sources, 2/3 of all buildings in Golbag were destroyed. In the provincial capital of Kerman, center of copper and coal mining in Iran, only minor damage was caused, according to a spokesperson of the provincial government. According to the Geological Survey of the USA in Golden, Colorado, the quake, which occurred at 9:24 a.m., CEST, measured 6.9 points on the open Richter scale. In 1977, 580 human beings were killed and more than 1,000 injured in the same area by an earthquake measuring 5.8 on the Richter scale. A year earlier, an earthquake in the Tabriz area had killed about 15,000 human beings.
Tagesanzeiger Zürich, Friday, 12th June 1980.
Yes, I was there several times, and also for a longer period of time.
That is well known to me. But now continue to listen, because there is still a third event that will follow these two that were mentioned, but this will happen in England. This event will be a sign of the fact that the prophecies of Fatali, which you have written down concerning England, will begin to fulfill themselves in the first phases.
Then it probably just concerns the assassination attempt on the Queen, which you mentioned to me once as that sign of the times which should be the basic beginning of the beginnings of fulfillment of the prophecies.
Shotgun assassination attempt on the Queen.
13th of June. During the traditional birthday parade of the British Queen Elizabeth II in London, 17-year-old Marcus Simon Sargent fires 6 shots at the Queen from a 9mm blank pistol at close range. The Queen's horse, riding to Buckingham Palace on the occasion of the celebrations, spooks, but the Queen is unhurt and escapes with a fright. The youthful assassin is located and arrested by police officers immediately after the act. The enraged crowd watching the parade at the roadside shouts, "Hang him! Hang him!" British justice shows unyielding toughness towards the gunman assassin. Under the High Treason Act of 1842, he was sentenced to the maximum penalty. He receives 5 years imprisonment.
Your memory is as good as ever. Yes, only a short time after the devastating earthquake in Iran, the Queen of England will be attacked by a not yet 20-year-old adolescent, but the Queen will not receive any injuries and will escape with fright. Yeah, this is because the firearm of the youth will only be loaded with deceptive ammunition.
Do you mean that the assassination weapon will only contain blank bullets?
Sure.
I do not understand that.
This has its special reasons, but they are not supposed to be mentioned officially.
Then just don't.
Around the 18th to 19th of June, 1981, the Israeli president will be able to achieve his first success with regard to his insidious attack on the nuclear power plant in Iraq, because the illusory reproaches of various countries will lead to the result that no sanctions will be taken against Begin and Israel, which will entice him to charge the German politicians as being criminals and as the ones responsible for the anti-Semitic machinations in the last World War. And this time, he will even go so far as to make the entire German people responsible for this.
Israel should pay for reactor damage.
New York. France and Britain have demanded that the UN Security Council condemn Israel's destructive strike on Iraq's nuclear research center and pay damages. Both nations, in agreement with the USA, reject punitive measures against Israel. The Arab states threaten an oil embargo in case the USA vetoes sanctions.
Blick, Zürich, Wednesday, 17th June, 1981.
UN Security Council unanimously condemns Israeli reactor attack. Israel condemned without sanction.
New York, 19th June. AP, the UN Security Council on Friday night strongly condemned Israel for destroying an Iraqi nuclear reactor in an airstrike in a unanimously adopted resolution. It considered the attack a serious threat to the overall safeguards of the IAEA International Atomic Energy Agency, which is the basis of the Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty. The draft resolution, which dispenses with sanctions originally demanded by the Arab side, had been formulated by U.S. UN Ambassador Jean Kirkpatrick, together with Iraqi Foreign Minister Sadoun Hamadi. The other members of the Security Council who all voted in favor of the resolution are The Soviet Union, China, the GDR, Great Britain, France, Ireland, Spain, Mexico, Panama, Niger, Tunisia, Uganda, Japan, and the Philippines. Israeli UN Ambassador Yehuda Blum, speaking on behalf of his government, rejected the resolution as biased and one-sided. He said Israel had merely exercised its legitimate right to self-defense in eliminating this terrible nuclear threat to its existence. U.S. ready to condemn Israel's attack on Beirut airport and to seek compensation. Iraq, on the other hand, was willing to pay a high price with substantial concessions to avoid a veto by the U.S. and possibly Britain and France. The moderate stance of Iraq, classified in the American media as a radical state allied with the Soviet Union, has come as a surprise. Washington's diplomatic relations with Iraq have been severed since 1967. Recently, however, it was thought that Iraq was trying to distance itself from Moscow. Especially since the conflict with Iran, Iraq has been forced to increase its economic efforts and thus open up to the American economy, which in turn is eager to participate in Iraq's ambitious development projects. The loser in the UN debate is seen as the Soviet Union, which had hoped to condemn Israel and the USA together with the Arab states. Instead, Moscow now has to accept an Iraqi-American rapprochement as well as a resolution that was co-written and supported by the USA.
Tagesanzeiger Zürich, Saturday, 20th June 1980.
Typical.
Sure, but continue to listen to what will happen. The month of June, 1981 calls for a severe earthquake in Iran, in the region of Kerman, causing around 1,300 deaths. Following this, on the 23rd of June, a bomb assassination attempt will take place on the Iranian cabinet in Tehran.
During prayer, assassination attempt on Khomeini's confidant.
Tehran, an influential confidant of the Persian revolutionary leader Khomeini, was seriously injured in a bomb attack in Tehran at the weekend. Hojatollah Ali Khamenei, 42. The explosive device went off during a prayer in the Ai Abusar Mosque. Khamenei is one of the radical Islamic personalities who deposed President Bani Sadr a week ago.
Blick Zürich, Monday, 29th June 1981.
The result will be that approximately 70 people will die, whereby one of Khomeini's horrible mass murderers will also be killed, the blood judge Kalkali.
Bloodbath. Bomb shredded Khomeini's executioner, 69 dead, including 10 government officials.
An unprecedented bloodbath ensued in a bomb attack on the Tehran headquarters of Iran's ruling Islamic Republican Party on Sunday night. The bomb shredded revolutionary leader Khomeini's executioner Ayatollah Mohammad Beheshti, 52, the country's top judge. Beheshti was the most powerful man in Iran after Khomeini and leader of the ultra-conservative Muslim Party. At least 68 other prominent Iranians fell victim to the assassination, including 10 members of the government and 20 members of parliament. Almost the entire leadership of Iran was literally wiped out. Around 100 persons suffered injuries, some of them serious. This also includes Prime Minister Mohammad al-Rajai. Rajai survived the attack because he had left the meeting hall immediately before the explosion.
Blick Zürich, Tuesday, 30th June 1981.
Only a month later, on the 28th of July, Iran will once again be shaken by a major quake, again in the region of Kerman, but this time it will demand 7,200 deaths, while several cities and villages will fall to the ground. Only shortly after the assassination attempt in Tehran, another severe earthquake will shake the Philippines. The earthquake will be connected with a volcanic eruption, and about 130 humans will fall victim to this.
Then all sorts of things will occur in this time alone. There is probably also the madman of Qom, Khomeini, who will begin his mass executions again, after all that you said in reference to Iran.
Khomeini punishes ever bloodier.
Death sentence for adultery. Whipping for drunkards. Tehran. Ayatollah Khomeini's iron rule over Iran is getting bloodier and bloodier. Now he wants to box his country back into the Middle Ages with a new penal code. In future, the slogan, "an eye for an eye, a tooth for a tooth," will apply in Iran. And after the disappearance of ex-President Bani Sadr, there is no prominent politician left who opposes this madness. The new law, which is supposed to be based on the Quran, provides for harsher punishments for all crimes. Murderers and adulterers face the death penalty. Thieves will have their hands chopped off. Even harmless drunkards will be cruelly whipped. Victims of crime are allowed to take revenge. If they kill the perpetrator in the process, they only have to pay a blood money. Horrible punishments are described in a bland official tone. Whoever cuts off another's right hand shall also have his right hand cut off. If he has no right hand, his left hand can also be cut off. If he has no hand at all, one of his legs shall be cut off. The same principle applies to knifemen. As punishment, a knife is plunged into the criminal's body the same number of times and the same depth. Of course, in this medieval machination, the woman does not have the same rights as the man. To convict an adulterer, the testimony of 8 women is needed. If the witnesses are men, 4 are enough. And if a man kills a woman, the victim's family must pay a blood money to the family of the perpetrator sentenced to death. No one doubts that the new law will be passed in Parliament.
Blick, Zurich, Saturday, 27th of June, 1981.
Target of the bomb, Iran's leadership.
Tehran, Beirut, Ankara, 29th June. AP, AFP, DDP, Reuters, Sunday's bomb attack on the headquarters of the IRP Islamic Republican Party in Tehran, Monday's TA. Part of the edition has claimed scores of victims among Iran's Shiite conservative leadership. Among the 69 dead, named by government spokesman Behzad Nabawi, at a press conference on Monday, Islamic TV reported 77 fatalities in the evening. Our party leader and Chief Justice Ayatollah Mohammad Beheshti, 4 ministers, 6 deputy ministers, and 20 members of parliament. At least 30 other persons suffered injuries. Meanwhile, Iran's underground National Equality Party has claimed responsibility for the attack. The 2-story headquarters of the party of the Shiite conservative clergy in Tehran's Chechmeh Street was almost completely destroyed. According to Nabawi's statement, the 30-kilogram explosive device had detonated in a neighboring building and had torn down the ceiling of the party building, under which those present were buried during a speech by Beheshti, who was considered the second man in Iran after revolutionary leader Ayatollah Ruhollah Khomeini. The Ministers of Energy Hassan Abbaspour, Post and Telecommunications Mahmoud Gandhi, Environment Mohammad Ali Fajasbakhsh, and Roads and Transport Musa Kalantari were killed, as was Hajjatul Islam Mohammad Montaseri, the son of Ayatollah Hussein Ali Montaseri, considered the successor to Khomeini. Government spokesman Nabawi expressed the view that deposed President Abul Hassan Bani Sadr had nothing to do with the attack. He may have been informed about it beforehand, but he doesn't have enough might behind him to do something like this, he said, but later conceded that any 3 or 4 persons could have gained access to the building next door to the party headquarters and planted the bomb. In an initial statement, Khomeini spoke of a plant by opponents of the revolution that had hit the most dedicated servants of the revolution. Prime Minister Mohammad Ali Rajai and Parliament Speaker Hajjatul Islam Ali Akbar Hashemi Rafsanjani The two members of the tripartite council remaining after Beheshti's death, which took over from the president after Bani Sadr's fall, immediately conferred with Khomeini. The revolutionary leader reportedly demanded that the 10 vacancies in the cabinet be filled as soon as possible. Ayatollah Abdul Karim Musawi Ardabili, the Iranian prosecutor general, was appointed as the new Chief Justice. Radio Tehran interrupted its regular program and broadcast only surahs from the Quran. A week-long state mourning was ordered for the whole of Iran. Tuesday and Wednesday were declared public holidays. The Iranian armed forces will not observe this holiday, according to a statement from the General Staff. Radio Tehran reported that Beheshti and the other victims of the blast are to be buried on Tuesday with a solemn state funeral. In Ankara, an Iranian dissident movement claimed responsibility for the attack. In calls to international news agencies, one man said he represented the Nationalist Equality Party. He said his organization was responsible for the attack on the IRP headquarters, as well as the bombing of IRP founding member Ali Khamenei last Saturday. The caller stated in Turkish with a heavy Iranian accent, "Militants of the Nationalist Equality Party carried out the orders of General Mukhtar Karabag and took out the chief killers."
Tagesanzeiger, Zürich, Tuesday, 30th June 1980.
That will, unfortunately, be the case because many hundreds will soon fall victim to the insanity of this man.